All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into one of the most dramatic origin stories you'll ever hear. It's a story of incredible risk, an improbable rescue, and how a leader was forged against literally impossible odds. This is the story of Moses. You gotta understand, this entire story, it all comes down to one massive conflict. On one side, you have the absolute power of a king and a law that demands death. And on the other, a simple act of faith that completely rewrites a child's destiny. This is where it all kicks off.
So let's set the scene. We're in ancient Egypt, a place of immense power, but for the Hebrew people, it's a place of deep oppression. The Pharaoh, he's afraid of their growing numbers, so he issues this horrifying command. Every single baby boy born to a Hebrew family is to be killed. And it's in this climate of just, absolute terror that our story begins. Now, right in the middle of all this state-sanctioned violence, a husband and wife from the priestly line of Levi have a son. And from the moment he's born, they see something special in him. The text says he was a goodly child. Now, this isn't just parents being proud. It's a deep-seated belief. And it's a belief that's going to fuel an incredible act of defiance.
For 3 months, they hide him. Now, let's be clear, this was an act of high treason. They were defying the most powerful man on earth. And as the text says, they did this by faith. They weren't driven by fear of the king. They were driven by a trust in something much, much higher.
But you can't hide a growing baby forever, right? The time comes when they just can't conceal him anymore. But his mother, Jochebed, she doesn't give up. Instead, she comes up with a plan. And it's desperate, it's audacious, but it's also incredibly strategic.
And you have to see, this wasn't just some desperate hope for the best toss into the river. No, this was an engineered plan. His mother literally weaves a small boat, an ark, and she waterproofs it to make sure it's a vessel of survival. She places it in the Nile, the very river that was supposed to be his grave, but she does it strategically right there among the reeds. And the final step, a crucial one, she posts her daughter, Miriam, at a distance to watch what happens. Every single step here is deliberate. Okay, so the plan is in motion. The tiny ark is floating in the Nile. Miriam is watching from the shore. Everything, and I mean everything, now hangs on what happens next. Is this just going to be a random twist of fate? Or, as the story suggests, is this an act of providence about to unfold?
And this is where the story takes a turn that you couldn't make this up. The one person who comes down to the river to bathe, the one person who finds this little ark, is the daughter of the very same Pharaoh who signed the death warrant. I mean, what are the odds?
This is the pivot point. The princess opens the basket, and she knows. Instantly. She says, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." But she isn't moved by her duty to her father's law. No, she's moved by compassion. And that one feeling? It changes the course of history.
And Miriam, seeing this flicker of compassion, she goes for it. This young girl walks right up to a princess and says, "Hey, should I go find a Hebrew woman to nurse him for you?" And the princess agrees. And get this, in a twist that is just stunning, Miriam goes and gets the baby's own mother. So now the state is paying Jochebed to raise the very son it had condemned to death.
So, think about what this means. He gets to spend his first crucial years with his own family, learning his own heritage and identity. But when the time came, his mother honored her side of the deal. She brings him to the palace, where he's formally adopted by the princess and becomes a prince of Egypt. And it's the princess who gives him his name, Moses. And this is so important because the name itself is a permanent reminder of how he was saved. It literally means drawn out, forever tying his identity to that incredible moment he was pulled from the waters of the Nile. So this right here sets up the core conflict of his entire young life. Right? He's a man of two worlds, completely at odds with each other. A Hebrew by blood, but an Egyptian prince by his position and his training. I mean, just really think about this contrast for a second. On the one hand, his deepest roots are with an enslaved people. He was nursed by his own Hebrew mother. But on the other hand, he's raised in the lap of luxury as the adopted son of a princess, learning the ways of the very empire that's crushing his people. Can you even imagine the internal conflict he must have felt? And we're not just talking about any education. This was the best of the best.
He wasn't just living in the palace, he was absorbing everything it had to offer. The Book of Acts highlights this, saying he was trained in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and became powerful in both speaking and acting. Skills that, well, you can probably guess are going to be pretty important later on.
All right, so let's zoom out and connect some of these dots. How did all of this whole chain of seemingly impossible events, a death sentence, a mother's risky plan, a princess's compassion, how did all that actually work to create a future leader? How does it all fit together?
Well, the narrative points to a bigger purpose at play. This quote from Proverbs really frames the whole story. It's the idea that even the heart of a king, or in this case a princess, can be turned to serve a divine plan that's beyond our understanding. That act of compassion isn't seen as random, but as part of a much bigger picture.
It's like this whole experience was the perfect, and I mean perfect, preparation for what was to come. Because he had the heritage of the Hebrews, he had a heart for the suffering of his people. But because he had the education of the Egyptians, he understood the power of their oppressor from the inside out. He was the only one who could be the perfect bridge between these two worlds. And that's the powerful, beautiful irony at the very heart of his story. The Nile River, which by law was supposed to be his grave, became the very instrument of his salvation. The place of death gave him his life, and it even gave him his name.
And so, this all leaves us with the huge question that would define the rest of his life. He was raised with all the power and privilege of an empire, but he carried the blood and the story of the people that empire was crushing. So, which world is he going to choose? His whole identity was forged in this conflict, and a choice, well, it was absolutely inevitable.